My name is Sophia. I am 24 years old. I once believed life was a gentle stream, easy and predictable. I floated along without a care in the world. I had no job, no stress, and certainly no 5-year plan. My father was a wealthy man, so my life was that of a princess in a modern-day castle. My days began whenever I chose to wake up. Breakfast would be waiting for me, my room tidied by unseen hands. I would spend hours watching television shows or endlessly scrolling through social media on my phone. If a desire popped into my head, I fulfilled it. If I wanted to shop, I shopped. If I wanted to dine out, I went. My friends would often say, "Sophia, you have the perfect life." And from the outside, I truly did. My father gave me everything I could ever ask for. I was his only child. My mother passed away when I was too young to form any lasting memories of her. My father was a constant presence of provision, if not of time. He worked tirelessly, leaving before sunrise and returning after sunset, but he never denied me anything. He gifted me designer clothes, countless pairs of shoes, a sleek black sports car, and even a delicate gold watch for my birthday. New phones and luxury handbags were a regular occurrence. I never glanced at price tags. My only concern was whether I liked something. Our home was a sprawling white mansion with 5 bedrooms and a sparkling blue swimming pool in the backyard. We had a full staff to cook, clean, and drive. I never had to wash a single dish. I never even had to open my own front door. I simply existed in a bubble of comfort and consumption. My social life was a whirlwind of trips to the mall, trendy cafes, and exclusive parties. We would laugh, snap photos for our online profiles, and chatter about our next lavish vacation. I was completely ignorant of real-world problems. I assumed the river of money would flow forever. I believed life would always be this effortless and fun. I knew my father worked hard, but I never comprehended the depth of that hardship. I would see the exhaustion etched on his face some nights, but I never thought to ask about its cause. I would simply offer a cheerful smile and a quick, "Good night, Daddy." I never inquired about his feelings, his work, or the immense pressure he must have been under to fund my extravagant lifestyle. I simply didn't care. My own world was all that mattered, but one Friday night that world shattered. I came home late after a fun dinner with my friends where we'd eaten gourmet pizza and taken dozens of pictures. As my car pulled into the driveway, I noticed the house was completely dark. This was unusual. Normally, the house was aglow with lights, a beacon of warmth and activity. I let myself in and walked upstairs to my father's room. It was empty. I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The next morning, a frantic knocking on my bedroom door jolted me awake. It was our housekeeper, her face pale with worry. "Sophia," she said, her voice trembling, "your father is in the hospital." A chill spread through my body. "What happened?" I managed to ask. "He collapsed from a sharp pain in his chest. An ambulance was called. They say he is stable now, but you must go immediately." We rushed to the hospital. Seeing my father lying in that sterile white bed with tubes connected to his arm was a shock. His eyes were closed, and he looked frail and exhausted. I sat by his side, holding his hand. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at me and attempted a weak smile. "Sophia," he whispered, "you need to be strong now." Later, a doctor pulled me aside. "Your father has a severe heart condition," he explained gravely. "He cannot return to work. He requires complete rest for a very long time." I stared at the doctor, speechless. I had only ever known my father as a pillar of strength. The man in that hospital bed was a stranger. 2 days later, my father's lawyer visited. He handed me a stack of documents. "The business is gone, Sophia." "There is no more money." I was utterly confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Your father's company was facing serious financial trouble," he explained patiently. "It has been losing money for a while. Now it's bankrupt. There is nothing left. You will have to sell the house and all of your assets." I stood there, frozen in disbelief. "This has to be a mistake," I pleaded. But it wasn't. It was the brutal truth. We were penniless. We had to leave our home. A week later, I was packing my life into cardboard boxes. I took one last look around my beautiful room. The large vanity mirror, the plush king-sized bed, the luxurious silk curtains. I ran my hand over my dressing table one final time, then closed the door on my old life forever. We moved into a cramped apartment in a run-down part of the city. It had 2 tiny rooms and a small, dingy kitchen. There was no sofa, only 2 hard-backed chairs. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the floor was perpetually cold. It wasn't a home, but it was all we had. My father spent most of his days in bed, looking weak and defeated. I learned to make him tea and cook simple meals like scrambled eggs. I cleaned the apartment and washed our clothes by hand in the small sink. I had never done any of these chores before. My hands ached and my back was constantly sore. I was clumsy and slow, but there was no one else to do it. One afternoon, I checked our finances. The refrigerator was nearly empty. In a kitchen drawer, I found a single $20 bill. That was everything we had left in the world. I looked over at my father, who was sleeping fitfully. I sat down at the small kitchen table, not crying, but feeling a strange sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do. I changed into my cleanest clothes and walked out of the apartment, heading towards the city center. I went from shop to cafe to store, asking the same question. "Are you hiring?" Most people shook their heads with a simple no. A few replied, "We're only looking for people with experience." I felt invisible, insignificant, but I refused to give up. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small bakery tucked away on a quiet side street. An elderly woman with a tired but kind face was kneading dough inside. I took a deep breath and asked, "Do you need any help?" She sized me up for a moment and then asked, "Can you clean tables and pack bread?" I nodded eagerly. "Yes, I can learn." She looked at me again, a long, assessing gaze, then said, "Be here tomorrow, 6 in the morning." I walked home as the sun began to set. My shoes were worn and my feet throbbed, but I had a job. It was a humble job. It wouldn't pay much, but it was a start. It was mine. That night, I shared the news with my father. He looked at me, a flicker of pride in his tired eyes, and said, "Good job." He managed a small smile. I smiled back. It wasn't the life we knew, but this small victory felt more real than any shopping spree ever had. The next morning, my alarm went off while the sky was still dark. I got ready and walked to the bakery. The woman, whose name I learned was Martha, handed me a plain white apron. She gave me brief instructions on how to clean, where to put the fresh loaves, and how to pack them. She was a woman of few words and not particularly friendly, but she was fair. I worked for 6 straight hours. I wiped down tables, packed pastries, and swept the floor until my arms felt like lead and my back screamed in protest. But I didn't stop. I was driven by the thought of earning money to help my father. At the end of my shift, Martha handed me a small, crinkled paper bag. Inside was a single $10 bill. I stared at it. It was the first money I had ever earned myself. It was a small amount, but it felt heavier and more valuable than any $1,000 handbag. I walked home slowly, my legs aching, but my heart was filled with a quiet sense of accomplishment. I had done something real with my own 2 hands. Back at the apartment, I made my father some tea. "How was your day?" he asked. "It was hard," I admitted, "but I did it." He watched me for a long moment, then said, "I'm proud of you." A warmth spread through my chest. That night I sat by the window looking out at the dark city skyline. I whispered to myself, I will not give up. I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning. My body protested, heavy with a fatigue I'd never known. I used to sleep until noon. Now I was up before the birds. I'd wash my face with cold water, tie back my hair, and put on the same simple clothes from the day before. New outfits were a luxury I could no longer afford. The streets were silent and chilly as I made my way to the bakery. Martha was always there first. "You're late," she'd say if I was even 2 minutes behind schedule. She was strict. "I'm sorry," I'd murmur, grabbing a broom and getting to work. My days fell into a rhythm of sweeping, cleaning, packing bread, and washing trays. For the first few weeks, I made countless mistakes. I put the wrong pastries in the wrong bags. I dropped a full tray of croissants. I forgot to close a storage box. Martha would get frustrated. "You must pay attention," she'd scold. "Use your eyes, use your hands, move faster." I felt foolish, but I held my tongue and just tried to do better. At noon, I'd take a short break outside, eating my simple lunch of rice and a boiled egg. I watched people in stylish clothes walk by, laughing and chatting. I remembered my old life, the carefree lunches in fancy cafes. Now my shoes were dusty and my arms were sore. I fought back tears, ate quickly, and returned to work. The days were long and grueling. My feet and back ached constantly. But I always finished my shift. Martha would hand me my $10 and I would walk home, my legs feeling like they were made of stone. Seeing my father's small smile when I walked through the door was all the reward I needed. I worked at the bakery every single day. The work was physically demanding, but I slowly improved. I made fewer errors. Martha still spoke to me in a sharp tone, but her shouting became less frequent. One afternoon, she remarked, "You are learning." It was the first piece of praise she had ever given me, and it meant the world. Still, life was a constant struggle. We had just enough money to cover rent and basic food. I bought nothing for myself. My phone was an old model with a cracked screen. My shoes had developed small holes. My old friends had stopped calling. Perhaps they forgot about me, or perhaps they didn't know what to say to the girl who had lost everything. I didn't blame them, but the silence was a painful reminder of the world I no longer belonged to. One evening, I sat with my father in our tiny kitchen. I had brought him a small cookie from the bakery. He took a bite and said, "You used to bake cupcakes when you were a little girl." A faint memory surfaced, and I smiled. "They were probably terrible," I said. "They were better than this cookie," he replied with a soft chuckle. The next day was Sunday, my only day off. After cleaning the apartment and doing laundry, I found a small, dusty box of flour in the back of a cupboard. I also found some sugar and a couple of eggs. My father's words echoed in my mind. I decided to try again. Using an old bowl and a fork, I mixed the ingredients. I didn't have butter, so I used a little vegetable oil. We didn't have a proper oven, just a small countertop toaster oven. I managed to make 6 small, simple cupcakes. They didn't look like much, but they smelled wonderful. I gave one to my father. He took a bite, and a genuine, wide smile spread across his face. "Still better than the bakery," he declared. On an impulse, I took one to our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Davis. She had always been kind to me. "Did you make this, dear?" she asked. "Yes, just now," I replied. She took a bite. "Oh, it's wonderfully soft and sweet. Could I buy some from you for my granddaughter's birthday next week?" I stared at her, stunned. "Buy them?" "Of course," she said. "I'd love to have these for my guests." That night I lay awake, her words replaying in my head. Could I actually sell something I made? I had no money for a fancy shop, but maybe, just maybe, I could bake a few cupcakes on the weekends. I could try. On Monday, I went back to the bakery and worked my shift as usual. That week, I saved $5 from my earnings. On Saturday, I went to the local market and bought more flour, sugar, and eggs. I baked 12 cupcakes that night, placing them in small paper liners I found. On Sunday morning, I knocked on Mrs. Davis's door. I handed her the box of cupcakes. She gave me a crisp $10 bill. I was shocked. "Good work deserves good pay," she said with a warm smile. "Don't you ever forget that." Later that evening, she called me. "3 of my guests absolutely loved your cupcakes. One of them wants to order some for next week. May I give her your number?" "Yes," I whispered, my hand shaking as I hung up the phone. I looked at my father, who was sipping his tea, and told him what had happened. He looked at me and said, "This is only the beginning, Sophia." For the first time in months, I felt a surge of genuine excitement. It was just a small thing, just cupcakes, but they were mine. I had made them with my own hands. I had sold them. I felt a sense of pride I had never known before. It wasn't the pride of owning expensive things, but the pride of creating something real. My cupcakes were small, but they represented a giant new hope. Every Sunday became my baking day. People started calling, first for 10 cupcakes, then 15, then 20. I baked late into the night after my shifts at the bakery. I packed them in simple cardboard boxes, writing the customer's name on top with a pen. One day, a customer asked, "Can you make a chocolate version?" "I'll try," I promised. I found some affordable cocoa powder and experimented until the cupcakes came out dark, moist, and delicious. She loved them and ordered a dozen for the following week. Each dollar I earned was reinvested into my little home business. My hands were always covered in flour, and I was perpetually tired, but it was a good kind of tired. My father watched my progress. He didn't say much, but I could see the warmth and pride in his eyes. One day he told me, "You work harder than I ever did at your age." Not every day was a success. One Sunday, distracted for just a moment, I opened the oven to find a batch of cupcakes burned to a crisp. I had no money for more ingredients. I sank to the floor and cried out of pure frustration. "I can't do anything right," I sobbed. But then I remembered my first clumsy weeks at the bakery. I had made so many mistakes, but I hadn't quit. So I wiped my tears, stood up, and used the last of my flour to make a smaller batch. I called the customer and honestly explained I could only provide half her order. She was understanding. Another time, a customer complained that her cupcake was too dry. The criticism stung and I wanted to give up. But my father said, "One person's opinion doesn't define your work. Keep going." So I did. I started adding a small, handwritten label to each box. "Made with care by Sophia. Thank you." People appreciated the personal touch. One Saturday, I counted my savings. I had managed to put away $180. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. My father looked at the money and asked, "Have you thought about setting up a small stall?" We went to a busy street near the train station, where small vendors sold everything from hot tea to handmade jewelry. I learned that a spot for one day would cost $50. "Try it for one Sunday," my father encouraged me. The next Sunday, I stood nervously behind a small folding table. I had covered it with a clean cloth and arranged my cupcakes in neat rows. A handwritten sign read, "Sophia's Cupcakes, small $1, large $2. My hands trembled as I smiled at passers-by. Many people glanced over and kept walking. But then a little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, pointed, and said, "I want the pink one." He handed me a dollar bill, my first stall customer. I'll never forget him. By the end of the afternoon, I had sold 12 cupcakes. I packed up the rest and headed home. My feet ached, but my heart was light. I showed my father the money I'd made. He counted it, looked up at me, and said simply, "You did it." Week after week, my sales grew. Soon, I was selling out every Sunday. A woman asked me to sell my cupcakes at her child's school fair. I baked all night, with my father helping me pack the boxes. I sold every single cupcake that day. After 2 months, the man with the tea stall next to mine smiled at me. "You work very hard," he said, handing me a warm cup of tea. "Your cakes always smell so good." His kindness meant so much to me. With my savings, I bought better baking trays and a second apron. I even had a small, professional-looking sign printed, "Sophia's Cakes." It was just a piece of paper, but seeing my name on it filled me with pride. One evening, I found an old photo album. I flipped through pictures of my former self, draped in designer dresses, standing next to expensive cars. I looked happy in those photos, but I remembered the profound emptiness I felt inside. Now I wore old clothes and had no fancy watch on my wrist, but I had something far more valuable. I had a purpose. I had hands that knew the value of hard work, and I had people telling me that something I created was good. That validation was worth more than all the gold in the world. My father's health improved. He started taking short walks and even helped me mix the batter. His smile returned, more genuine than ever before. One evening, he said, "Life knocked you down, Sophia, but you didn't stay down. You stood up and built something new. I have never been more proud of you." I looked at him, my heart full. "You worked your whole life for me, Dad. Now it's my turn to work for us." We didn't need a big house or a fancy car. All we needed was peace, purpose, and each other. And in our small apartment, surrounded by the sweet smell of baking, we finally had it all. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Your support allows us to bring you more inspiring stories like this one.